Hello everyone, this is Scott. Welcome to my channel. If you're your first time, welcome. Thank you for showing up. Love to have you with us. Today I want to take a little bit of time and talk about leadership. You know, everybody talks about leadership, but that's what they do. They talk about leadership, but they don't talk about really what leadership is. Like people say, oh yeah, you should, if nobody's in charge, you should go and take charge. Well, how do you do that? You know, a lot of times we don't get involved into the how do you do that. Well, I spent 8.5 years in the military. I was a staff sergeant when I got out. I've been to several of the Army's leadership training courses. After I got out, I've been to several corporate leadership training courses. I've taken seminars, I've taken classes, I've read books. I've done a lot of different things over the years, and really, you know, you can really get buried under what leadership is and how you should be a leader, or how you should be a manager. You know, there's a difference. There's leaders and there's managers. You know, if you are a leader, you are taking charge of people. If you're a manager, you're pushing papers. And so in this video, I really want to talk about leadership and what that is. And then the first thing I want to tell you is that leadership is work. It's not easy. It just takes it's not necessarily hard, and yes, there are better leaders than others. I don't consider myself a very good leader, just because I don't have a lot of those social skills, or I'm not charismatic. And if you guys have watched a couple of my videos, you can see that. But over the years, I've developed, some things that I consider what's important, even for a mediocre leader like me, to do, or to have, or what tools to have in my toolbox. When I was in the Army, I was the day I got PND5 in my specialty. I was a specialist 4, and then my hard stripe became at E5 or sergeant. And so my very first lessons I learned were pretty much the first day I became a sergeant, because when I became a sergeant, I became in charge. And the first thing was, we were out in the field and we were getting ready to go. We were getting ready to go line up for lunch. And I think they brought a hot meal out for us. So that was a treat. And my platoon sergeant said, "You now eat at the back of the line." He said, "You always take care of your troops first." And I was kind of heading that way anyhow, because I watched some of my superior NCOs do. So I kind of watched that. And so I was already heading that way, but he said, number one, you always take care of your troops first. And what does that mean? Well, it means you let them eat first. That way, if there's no food, you go hungry, not them. You check on them. You check their welfare. You check their rooms. If you're out in the field, you make rounds day and night to make sure they're okay. You always know where they are. I had a platoon sergeant that would just dog me. He would come up, I would be in the middle of something, and he would come up and say, "Where are all your people?" And he expected me to right then and there go down the list of people that I was responsible for and tell him exactly where each one was. It was not a good 10 minutes if I couldn't tell him. So I learned that lesson. The other thing that's really important is that the second you assume a leadership position, you need to start training your replacement. That's the way we did it in the Army, because of course in the Army you go to war, bullets fly, people die, and you may be one of them. And so you would be failing in your duty as a leader not to have somebody ready to step in and take your place. And you should do that today, especially in the prepper community. You need to do that. You need to start preparing your replacement now. And I still do. I do it today. I do it in the civilian world. I did it in the corporate world. I did it in the federal government. As soon as somebody was under me, however you want to put it, I started training them to take my place, so that when I left, they can pretty much step in. So those are the two things I learned almost, or actually a couple, 3 or 4 things I learned almost immediately, and they have served me to this day. Now, moving on from there, like I said, I've been to a lot of training. I've been to classes, seminars, workshops, read a lot of books, and then one day I sat down and I thought about, what does it really take to be a leader? You know, what are the few things that I could carry on maybe on the back of a business card in my wallet that would help me to be a leader? And I figured that out. I wrote them down and I carried around with me. I even wrote a little booklet at one time or another. But there are four primary things, and then there's a couple other little things on the side. But there are four primary things that as a leader, and even a mediocre leader like me, that you should do. And the first thing is, you should set the standard. I'll say that again, set the standard. What that means is you tell your people what you expect from them, what outcomes you expect from whatever it is you're doing. You set the standard. You know, one example that's pretty easy to see is when we would have morning inspection. And you know, in the Army, we would all line up in formation, and then the platoon sergeant would do an about face, and he'd say, "Squad leaders, inspect your platoons." And then what we would do as squad leaders is that we would go down man to man and we would look at his uniform. And to make this real brief, the one thing we do is we would look at each other's boots. If his boots were shinier than mine, he was good to go. If they weren't, he knew he needed to work. And I would tell him, I said, your boots aren't ready, or your uniform is wrinkled, but my uniform was always like it should be. Or if a particular day it wasn't, and that does happen, then on that day, everybody gets a free pass. So you set the standard. You cut your hair. If hair is important, in the military, hair is or was important. So you cut your hair a certain way. You say, does your haircut look like mine? You know. So you set the standard. And then I touched on it briefly, but the next thing, number 2, is set the example. In other words, never ask your people to do something that you wouldn't do yourself, or even if you haven't done it. Always set the example. If they don't know how to do it, then really you're expected to show them how to do it. You can't slough that off. So part of being a leader is being competent in your area of expertise. So set the standard, set the example. And that's a learn by doing thing. If you want everybody to have shiny boots, then you need to have shiny boots. If you want everybody to have a clean rifle, then you got to have a clean rifle. If you want everybody to shoot expert on the rifle range, then you have to shoot expert on the rifle range. It all goes back to that. Which takes me to number 3. And number 3 is be consistent. And this is kind of a hard one to explain, but be consistent. And what that means is, try to set your personality, set yourself up where you're treating everybody pretty much the same every day. And I'm not saying be a goody two-shoes, I'm not saying be an ogre, but whatever you do, be consistent. An example I can give is, I had a boss one time where one day he'd bring in donuts and we'd all be happy, and then the next day he was a Tasmanian devil from hell. And so whenever that next day showed up, you had no idea what to expect, and that affects the morale and it affects people's performance. Whereas if you're consistent, they know every day either to hide under the desk or to wait for that donut and have a cup of coffee ready. So be consistent, whatever you do. And that way when someone says, well, I always do it this way, and this is the way I always ask you to do it. So being consistent is important. And you can apply that in many different ways. I'm trying to be a little short, in the video, but try to think about that one a little bit. And then the last one of the 4 points is follow up. If you give somebody a task and you have to walk away to go do something else, or maybe check on another one of your team members or whatever, make sure you circle back around and make sure that, number one, the person's okay. Make sure he's doing what he asked. If he's got any questions, that's his opportunity to ask you. But follow up. What that does a couple things. One, it shows that you care about the guy enough to come back and check on him. But number two, you're checking up to make sure he's doing what you asked him to do. If you walk back up and he's asleep, and you've asked him to stack wood somewhere, he's not doing, and so you need to, we'll just say, light a little fire somewhere and get him motivated to complete that task. But it's important that you go back and follow up. It may be that you go back and the guy is, just dumbfounded with something, doesn't know how to do something, and there are people out there that are afraid to ask, and he'll try and work it, and he's going nowhere fast. He's wasting your time and his, especially if you've got something that's time sensitive. If you follow back, you can say, okay, what's the problem? Can I help you? And then the two of you can work it out and get things going again. So it's important to follow up. That, and if a person knows that you are always going to come back and check on them, they're more likely to complete the task you ask them. So those are the big 4. What I like to say about those is if you can do those 4 things, you will at least be a mediocre leader, which is better than most people that have no training at all, because they will fail. At least with these 4 things, you have a chance at success, and then you're going to have to throw a lot of your own, experiences into that. A couple other things I used to tell my privates, we were all privates at one time, but some of the things I would pass along to my privates. I would begin by teaching them leadership very early on, and I would tell them, if there's more than one of you, in other words, if there are 2 or more of you together, one of you is in charge. And I don't care how you figure that out, if it's by data rank, if it's by rank or whatever, but if there's more than 2 of you together, one of you is in charge. And one of you has to take responsibility for that formation. Because if I get a report back that you guys were doing something you weren't supposed to do, I'm going to find out who is in charge of that little group. And that does a couple things. It sets a standard, but you start teaching them leadership at a small level, 1, 2, or 3 people. But it's at a small level, and they start getting into that leadership thing. Because remember, as they grow up, as they gain rank and experience, they move up in the leadership position. So, start them off young. And I always told them, if there's more than 2, one of you is in charge. The second thing that I would tell them is never stand around with your thumb up your you-know-what. That's a bad thing in the Army. There's nothing that'll set a sergeant off more than to have 2, 3, 4, privates just smoking and joking somewhere. And I got caught in that myself, so I understand. And they would not be afraid to light somebody up because they weren't doing something. So I would tell my privates, do something. If you don't have a specific task, grab a broom, pick up cigarette butts, grab a rag and dust, take the trash out. I'm not asking you to do hard labor, but what I'm asking you to do is to stay busy. And I said, as long as you're busy, if somebody reports back to me and trying to complain about you, if you were busy, I said, I will stand behind you 100%. And I can, and I will back you. I will back you 100%. It's the same thing if one of my little private formations is asked to do something and they make a decision and it's the wrong decision, and then somebody comes up to me and wants to, get into my case about something they did. Well, if that group made a decision, same thing. I will back you 100%. Why? Because I want you to make a decision. I want you to do something, right or wrong, but make a decision, because that's part of the training of making a leader. And as long as they made a decision, I'll back them 100%. Now, when I get back to them later on, we might have a little sidebar, a little private discussion about maybe this is how we should do it next time. But again, you get them into that leadership. Make a decision, do something. One of you's in charge. Little bits, little baby steps, right? And that way, as they grow in their maturity and becoming a leader, they now are starting to have experiences, so that, if you take a bullet, if you go to another group, if you move to another state, they can step up and carry on where you left off. It's all important. So help, part of your job is to train. Part of your job is to lead. Part of your job is to manage. Part of your job is to check and follow up. It's work. It's a lot of work. Is it gratifying? Yeah, sometimes. Is it a pain in the butt? Yeah, a lot of times. But if you want to be a leader, these are the things you have to do. And then the other thing I used to tell my privates, I said, if you want to get along in the Army, always be in the proper place, at the proper time, in the proper uniform. If you can do that, you'll probably survive okay in the Army. And the same applies in the civilian world. If they know where they're supposed to be and what gear they're supposed to have and how they're supposed to dress, if they can do that, be in the proper place at the proper time in the proper uniform, then they'll get by in your little group as they're doing what you ask them to do. And then for junior NCOs or junior leaders, you sit there and say, additionally, you should also have a pen and paper. So we went from 3 Ps to 5 Ps, but pen and paper, and now today it might be cell phone, because you can do so much with a cell phone, but you get the idea. Be able to take notes, because as a leader, one of your superiors may come up and say, I have something for you to do. Can you copy this down? And you must be able to take those notes, because you don't know how long this order is going to be. It may be what they call an operations order or a frag order. And there's a lot of detail in there that you have to take down. Especially frag orders are like orally given. And so you need to be able to write that down so you can pass it to your troops and so you guys can be effective. So I hope this helps. Leadership is a lot of different things to a lot of different people. This is what has worked for me over the years. This is what has helped me to survive and thrive, so to speak. Like I said, I'm not a great leader. I'm not the one standing up and everybody's cheering around me, raising their weapons or their swords or whatever in the air. I just know how to get things done. I know how to take care of people. So for all you young leaders out there, all you who are being kind of pushed into these positions because no one else wants it, here's some guidance to get you started. So good luck. And look at this video multiple times you want. Comment below. If you're not a member, please subscribe below. I appreciate it. Pass it along to other people if you feel this information is good and intuitive to you. I'd love to see more people on this channel, and I'll be bringing out more content as time goes on. So take care, be good, be safe, be secure.